Okay, so now I'm coming to the Dead Sea Scrolls, translated the Qumran text in English by Florentino Garcia Martinez. This should be a fairly quick one because there's not um, the entire introduction and forward. While it's lengthy, it's got nowhere near the length of Giza Verni's books' introduction and forward, and doesn't offer quite as many um, ideas and thoughts. Some, but not very many. So let's see how quickly we can get through this. Okay, so here I am in the Dead Sea Scrolls translated, as I mentioned. And let me just, I'm going to have to just scroll you through some pages just so you can see. So there's the intro in the first edition. I go to the library book. Going through the pages, here's where we have the various contents. We'll have to go through quite a few pages of the various scrolls that he translated. Okay, and then we have a preface, which I'm not going to spend any time in. It's good information in there. We've got a foreword. And then he's got some, well, that's just part of the foreword. It's just, I won't explain that. Okay, and then we get to the introduction where we start getting some of his information. First up, he just does what they all do and starts giving us details of what happened, the papyri from the Wadi, just a lot of information about how the Dead Sea Scrolls came about. Interesting information, but not germane to what we're really trying to do. Here's talking about the history of the Qumran finds in their publication, the first manuscripts. Interesting, but not interest, excavations. I'm not a part of what we're talking about anyway. Sure I didn't skip anything here. No, we're still talking about the excavation. So we're quite a few pages in, and I'm sorry, I'm just showing you that there's just not much really that we're going to be talking about here. Now, in these sections, he's got the dispute over authenticity and antiquity, which means, is it real and is it old? And the answer to that is both. Yes to both. So we get to a sectarian library. We know it's a sectarian library in that you have a sect, you have a splinter, a group that has separated itself from mainstream, and it's a sect, considered a sect. Well, by this time, the faithful remnant would have been a sect of the society. So their library is a sectarian library. Okay. All right. So here's where, and let me make it larger. Here's where we start getting some information in the identity and origins of the Qumran community. Part 5 is where I started highlighting. And this is where, well, let me just start. Let me get rid of this real quick. I'll start where it says in the first place because we'll just start up here where it says in the first place. In the first place, it is shown that the Qumran community cannot possibly be identified with the zealots of the Jewish Christian community since neither the chronological outline nor the resulting profile fits. Okay. Second, it has determined that of the three best known groups of Judaism in the mid 2nd century BCE until the time of the destruction of Qumran in 68 CE, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes, the group most closely resembling the Qumran group is indeed the Essenes. Fine. If you're going to limit yourself to groups of Judaism for the occupants and identity of this community, then and if you're going to limit your groups of Judaism, if you're going to call Judaism the prevailing ways of the Jewish larger community that came about in the 2nd century, okay, fine. But what they're missing here is that when Onias and the sons of Zadok were deposed, the faithful remnant have gone off to create their own society in the ways of Torah, righteousness, his ways, his testimonies, his witnesses, etc. So if you're going to limit yourself to Judaism and these groups, fine. Essenes might would be the best option amongst those three, but they're just not the best option. Make it smaller again, see if I can go to the next. Here it is. Okay, so it was pretty quickly. Make it large again. The Qumran manuscripts make constant reference to a split, a fundamental division which occurred in the initial stages of the group being the Essenes. It's impossible, let me just back up a little bit. It is possible to account for the undeniable similarities and the differences, which are just as valid, meaning that he's talking about how you have differences between the community at Qumran and what they understood of the Essenes, the characteristics of the Essenes. It's possible to account for the undeniable similarities and the differences, which are just as valid, by invoking another form of connection between the two groups. And that is that the Qumran manuscripts make constant reference to a split, a fundamental division which occurred in the initial stages of the group. They even tell us that the founder of the Qumran community, the teacher of righteousness, as well as the man of lies, his rival in this clash, had previously belonged to the same community. They also tell us that in the conflict between them both, only a tiny minority sided with the teacher of righteousness. The best way to make sense of the undeniable connection that existed between the Essene movement and the Qumran community is to accept that the Qumran community arose specifically on account of a rift caused within the Essene movement to which the founder members belonged. Okay. Very critical. While I really like Florentino Garcia, this is chock full of revealing information, but wrong information. Because if going back to my other previous parts, there was a fundamental split, but not within the group of Essenes, but between the Zadokites, and the faithful remnant that became this minority group he's referring to, and the larger society led by illegitimate priests, etc. There's your clash. And the founder of the Qumran community was not the teacher of righteousness. The teacher of righteousness is Messiah. And so Messiah is the leader of the community to the same extent that Christ is head of the church and all kinds of things like that. But there was no priest or person that founded the Qumran community and was also identified as the teacher of righteousness. Like he's saying that the scrolls tell us. The scrolls do not tell us that. That is a misreading of the scrolls. It's a misunderstanding. And if you know the old writings, it's kind of easy to tell that what the scrolls are saying against the old writings. And the idea that there was a teacher of righteousness, they don't tell us that the Qumran community was founded by a priest, a person, someone who could also be identified as the teacher of righteousness. And the man of lies, his rival in the clash, the idea that they belong to the same community, well, I guess so, because ultimately they both belonged to Israel. Well, the Yehudim, which is the southern kingdom, because northern Israel had gone. But Israel that was existing in the time, the Yehudim, the Jews, they were all of one community. It wasn't until Antiochus IV deposed Onias and inserted illegitimate priests, the beginning of illegitimate priests that landed us in the Hasmonean dynasties, that we had this split. So they all did belong to one community. There was a split of that community, but that community is not the Essenes. The community is Yehudim, Israel. They also tell us of the conflict between them both and that only a tiny minority sided with the teacher of righteousness. I agree, because that's what I've been saying all along. The faithful remnant. It's always been throughout the history of Israel and modern day, the church. It's always the faithful remnant. It's a minority who truly seek to do the ways of Yahuwah, seek Torah, seek his righteousness, seek his ways, seek his testimonies and his witnesses. It's always been a small minority. And when the Zadoks were deposed, the faithful remnant followed them and their leadership. And I'm sure there were people of the family of Zadok who didn't care, and just like there would be Levite priests who didn't care. But within the Zadoks and within the Levites were plenty, some anyway, who did care and were the faithful remnant and were pursuing righteousness and the Torah. And they're the ones that went and set up this community. And so the founder of the community would have been these priests and the Zadokite priests, not necessarily one person. Maybe it was a group of them that started it, but it would have been the Zadokites. And because it's clear that they were ruling, they were the leaders of this community, and that there were priests in that pecking order, according to what I read in the previous part. Okay. So, and I'm just going to, last thing to say, just to disagree with them, the best way to make sense of the undeniable connection that existed between the Essene movement and the Qumran community is to accept that the Qumran community arose specifically on account of a rift caused by the Essene movement to which the founder members belong. No, again, that is because the faithful remnant split away from the illegitimate and worldly ways of Israel and the mainstream. Let me see if there's anything else. Page. Okay, so here he talks about the Groningen hypothesis, which Giza Vermes also spoke of. He says, on this topic too, the Groningen hypothesis has succeeded in providing a solution. The solution, and what's the solution? The solution is to the idea, let me come up here a little bit. The most frequent references, which also provide the best hope for making connection between the history of the community and official history, are to the wicked priest in the Habakkuk Pesher, which is commentary. He is said to be the highest power in the land, and at one stage he would persecute the teacher of righteousness and his community in their desert retreat. I'm going to highlight this if I can. This is kind of important. Okay. He is said to be the highest power in the land. So the wicked priest is the highest power in the land, and that would be especially when by the time Simon came upon, well, actually maybe even the time of Jonathan, because he was appointed governor. But when Simon came on, he became king and priest. So he would be the highest power in the land. He'd be both the priest and the king. And certainly Hyrcanus, who followed him, would fit the idea of wicked because he wasn't nice, where Simon might have been nice. I don't really know. And Jonathan might have been nice. Hyrcanus came on and he was not nice. And he also was king and priest. So they would be the most powerful person in the land. And they would set themselves up and persecute the teacher of righteousness. Well, they're saying that the teacher of righteousness is the founder of the community because they say he persecutes the teacher of righteousness and his community in their desert retreat. I'm going to say that would be true because if the teacher of righteousness was this person, which I'm saying it's not, that's Messiah. But whether the teacher of righteousness was a particular person or a group of people or a group of Zadokite priests, doesn't really matter because the wicked priests would have been persecuting this group. And they would have persecuted this group as a group, all by itself, as a community of faithful followers of Torah, opposing his rule and leadership because it's not legitimate, it's anti-Torah. But to the extent that the teacher of righteousness is Messiah, it also makes sense that the wicked one would oppose the teacher of righteousness when he comes, because the teacher of righteousness, whom I'm saying is the Messiah, would lead the people back into an right understanding of Torah and righteousness and the witness and testimonies of Yahuwah. That's what Messiah did. So the wicked priest, which ultimately results in this highest power in the land, and the wicked priest, which ultimately results in the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the people of the land, largely opposed Messiah, opposed Yahushua, and rejected him. Only the faithful remnant followed Messiah, and that community largely, my understanding is that community largely were followers of Messiah. They were actually, I think they were identified as the way even before Paul went to persecute him, and before Jesus came on the scene. They were identified as the way, followers of the way. And the followers of the way became adherents to the Messiah, believers in Yahushua, and therefore were also persecuted. So the way was persecuted before Yahushua, and then they were persecuted once Yahushua came because they were receiving Yahushua. They were believing on the Messiah. And so the powers of the land, the wicked priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all opposed the teacher of righteousness, whether it was Messiah or the founder of the community. It doesn't matter. They opposed all of it. Why? Because they had usurped the priesthood and by this time the kingship. They had power and they didn't want to give it up. And that's what this is all about. Since the mass features attributed to this person could not fit any of the high priests of the 2nd century BC. So this is the problem that this is going to resolve down here. And just tying it to what I was just saying, The problem was this wicked priest can't be identified as just one person readily. It's hard to make it fit one person. So, and that's what he's saying. Since the mass features attributed to this person can't fit any of the high priest, then a second solution, which is the Groningen hypothesis, succeeded in providing a solution. In essence, this part of the hypothesis surmises that the title wicked priest is not a nickname assigned to the high priest. Instead, it is an honorary title to the various Hasmonean high priests from Judas Maccabeus to Alexander Jannaeus, following an exact chronological sequence. This obviates the need for assigning to a single person all the different and contradictory features asserted to the wicked priest. To that I agree, that the wicked priest, everybody who was sitting illegitimately in the priesthood would be a wicked priest. Now I'm going to say, and when I first read this, I wasn't sure when he says Judas Maccabeus, Judas didn't sit in the role of high priest. So we shouldn't have said Judas Maccabeus. He should have said Jonathan Maccabeus was the first of the Maccabeans, the illegitimate priesthood of the Maccabean legacy, the Hasmonean dynasty, the hereditary place of the Maccabees in the high priesthood. So it starts with Jonathan, and I agree, all of them would fit. Well, again, I'm going to say Jonathan and Simon may not be wicked in their dealings with the people. Certainly from Hyrcanus forward, they were all wicked and did wickedness, things that you would obviously agree would be wicked activities, all the way down to Alexander Jannaeus, and actually farther than that. So I agree with this Groningen hypothesis in that, in summary, the teacher of righteousness is Messiah. The community is his faithful remnant that became, as a minority, went off into the desert and created a community and where they were trying to be faithful. And they both were being persecuted by this wicked priest, which would be any of the wicked priests sitting in power and to whom the community was opposing. So I just agree that with the Groningen, there's other things about the Groningen hypothesis that we would not agree with, but this aspect of it I would, and that is that the wicked priest that we see described in the scrolls would apply to multiple priests that sat in that position during this time from, say, 175 to BC to 70 AD. They're all wicked priests because they're illegitimate priests. Let me see if there's anything else that I highlighted in this. Okay, further reading. So that ends this analysis of Florentino Garcia Martinez's forward and introduction in the Dead Sea Scrolls translated